We're back with Chris Stewart, the author of the seven tipping points that saved the world. It is a fantastic book on history, and one that I think every American should read. It is one that you should own and read because it gives you some concept of how odd our life really is. Unless I was a feudal lord, I wouldn't have had this. Things are not what you. They're not. They haven't been homogenized by Disney. Genghis Khan. Tell the story about what he used to do to walled cities and how he used to get in.
Well, you know, there's a couple ways you can breach a barrier. You could build a catapult, you could build a ramp, or you could do what he did, and that was you took slaves or captured citizens and you would kill them and then pile their bodies up. And found out that that was a pretty nifty way to breach a wall as well, is just pile up the people you'd captured and killed.
So if you have a wall, he'd just take captives, start piling their bodies up until he made a ramp. So that, and then he would march his army up the ramp of dead bodies. I was struck by, you know, we talk about people now, you're using children as human shields. This guy did it and didn't care what anybody said.
He took it to a whole nother level. You know, there's a scene in there where they're attacking an empire and you know, the capital of this kingdom. And as the horses are riding towards them, they put rags around their feet to muffle the sound of their approach, and it makes it a little disorienting for the soldiers because they don't know from what direction all of them are coming. And they're looking through the dust, and you can see something before them as they're driving their horses forward, and then they realize their archers are about ready to attack, and they realize they're driving children from other cities around the capital there before the army, and they would use these children as you said, human shields. Sometimes they would tie them to their saddles and hold them in front of them, so that the archers, what do you do then if you've got these children out there in the middle of this battle that have been driven into, you know, before the Mongols? Do you dare fire your arrows, or do you hold back? And again, the confusion and the hesitation it would cause, well, it's a very evil, but probably an effective tactic.
He went up, Genghis Khan went up, I mean, the Mongols, they swept everywhere. Yeah. I mean, give an idea of how big that turned into.
You know, and that's a great point, because at one point he controlled more territory, in fact twice as much territory as any other single man. In 25 years, the Mongols had captured and controlled more territory than the Romans did in 400 years. I mean, they reached from India and Cambodia on the east, all through Central and Southwestern Asia, through the Middle East. It was, and reaching into Eastern Europe, it was an enormous swath of land that they had control over.
The Mongols went in and just killed, was it Kiev?
Yeah.
It just went in and just killed everybody.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, it was a few years later.
Yeah, 12 years later, it was nothing but a village of a few hundred people. I mean, and that's one of the things that he did that had very long-lasting and 700-800 years of impact. That there were entire cultures that we don't know about because there's nothing left. Virtually everyone was killed.
I wish I would have brought it to the set today. Didn't realize we would go down this conversation. I was sent a book today on Moses. I showed it to you, didn't I?
Yeah.
I showed it to you.
Yep.
This is the most beautiful book I've ever seen on Moses. It is just a few words at the bottom of each page, but these beautiful pieces of art on each page that tell the story of Moses. What's interesting about it, it was printed in Berlin in 1925. It's all in German. And it has a name on the cover, and I'm trying to find who owned this book and what the story of this book was. It was given to me, and it was given to me with a note that said, "Very few remain." Because that's exactly what Hitler tried to do. But in those days, Genghis Khan did it. Just erased entire towns, entire populations, killed every man, woman, and child, and did it to scare the next town.
Yeah. And you know, there's a great story about Kiev where the governor or the mayor essentially, Genghis was going to let him get by with paying a tithe, pay 10%, and he says, you can take it once we're dead. And he said, okay, and came in and just it destroyed the entire city. And as I said, a few years later, there's only a few hundred people who live there. And it's taken generations for some areas of the world to recover from that. And in some ways, some of them haven't. There's a sense of submission in some of the locations.
You make the point that some parts in Russia, the reason why they have been with the czars and then with Stalin and they still go back under Putin and everything else, is because of Genghis Khan, the Mongols.
They were conditioned by that. The Russian Christian Church essentially said, if we're faced with destruction or allowing you to come in and subjecting ourselves to you, we'll do that. And so they encouraged their people to be subjects to Genghis Khan. And as a result of that, they were working in concert with him to some level, and that's something that you can see through subsequent generations. Why they were willing to live under the czars and submit themselves to the czars or to the communist regimes. Many historians trace that back to that original conditioning by...
I'm struck not only by the fragility of freedom and how rare it is, but I'm also really I'm really struck in each story by, wow, this feels like a tipping point that we're at. Do you believe we're at an eighth tipping point?
The eighth tipping point? I don't know how we can't be. When you look at the clash of cultures, and I mean not just internally here within our own country, within the United States, but clash of cultures around the world. When you look at the public discourse that we see, we could talk about lots of different things, the monetary and fiscal policies that have the potential literally to destroy this nation. When you look at some of the political or cultural issues, and then when you look at the threats that we are going to face or our children are going to face, it seems to me like it's certainly a tipping point.
When we come back, I want to take a break. And when we come back, I want to start here. Progressives believe, and no judgment here, but the progressive ideology is based in man progresses and gets better. And we learn and we evolve, and I mean it really is tied to evolution. We evolve and we just get better. Our founders believed that the natural man is an enemy to God and an enemy to freedom. He gets a little bit of power and he will just run. I want to start there on just what does history tell us on which one is right? Do we progress or is the natural man an enemy of God? Back in a second.